XDN Sports, back with another video. This time, the 25 biggest, most impactful, important, poignant stories in wrestling history. Now, this is my list. Some may agree, some may disagree. Like the video, share, comment, subscribe, what have you. Number 25. The 25th biggest story in wrestling history. ECW's barely legal pay-per-view. Now, ECW was a company on the independent scene in the Northeast, the Philadelphia market, the New York City market. They moved to, Pittsburgh, Florida, eventually out to LA. But in 1997, it was unheard of an independent promotion, a small promotion, a local promotion pretty much, getting on pay-per-view. Now, this was helped by Vince McMahon, the World Wrestling Federation. They were funding ECW in a way, talent exchange. But also ECW was a movement. It was hitting the zeitgeist. It was a once in a lifetime type of thing that will never be duplicated. So getting on pay-per-view was huge. What helped to boost them was you have a legend like Terry Funk. Terry Funk, who he'd been in Japan, he'd been in America, he'd been everywhere. The Amarillo territory, WWF, he'd been everywhere, WCW. So his name, he was still able to go in the ring. This pay-per-view was, you can say, the peak of ECW. They had made their own stars out of misfits that no one wanted. Taz, Sabu, Raven, Tommy Dreamer, Stevie Richards, the Dudley Boys, so on and so forth. This pay-per-view is iconic. It's one of my favorite pay-per-views, one of the best pay-per-views ever, one of the best wrestling shows ever. The heat was tremendous. This was captured on the documentary Beyond the Mat. Barry Blaustein, Paul Heyman's vision, Operation, Todd Gordon. This was boosted also by Vince McMahon having ECW appear on Raw is War in 1997. They did a slight ECW invasion, one of the greatest Raws ever, iconic, memorable. Number 25. The number 24 biggest story in wrestling history. We stay in ECW, and this ties into the previous story. And number 24 is the New Jack Eric Koulas incident. This is in 1996. Wrestler Jerome Young, New Jack, had just debuted in the promotion this same year, about this time, 95, 96, what have you. And at a house show, a so-called alleged young wrestler, Eric Koulas, is backstage, and he's booked on this show to perform on the card. Backstage, him really being a young Mark, he goes up to New Jack, asks New Jack, I want to bleed, I want to get color, I don't know how to do it, can you do it? Why would you ask someone else to do it? But he's a Mark. New Jack goes in the ring. He doesn't cut this young man, he stabs him, he bleeds profusely. It leads to health complications. ECW is facing legal action. They're being looked at, investigated. New Jack is on trial again, arrested again, in trouble again. Eric Koulas eventually died from complications of this, and I believe he had physical weight issues to compound this problem. And this damn near destroyed ECW getting on pay-per-view. And many other things. The number 24. Number 23. CM Punk returns to wrestling after 7 long years. CM Punk, he built his name, IWA Mid-South, Ring of Honor, the indie circuit. He gets to Ohio Valley Wrestling, the developmental of the time of WWE. He gets called up to the main roster. He has an up and down run. He eventually gets his main event push in the summer of 2011. He has conflict with the front office other wrestlers, what have you. He develops a disdain towards wrestling, the environment, fans, wrestlers, production, whoever. Physically beat up, mentally beat up, stressed out. He abruptly leaves the WWE. He takes a break from wrestling. He announces he's going to the UFC. That fails. He does a few films, some commentary on MMA events. AEW, at this time, a wrestling promotion, comes into form in 2019. There was always rumors that they wanted CM Punk to be in it. There was always rumors that they wanted CM Punk to be in it. They always wanted him to be a part of it. They contacted him. They always wanted him to be a part of it. They contacted him. He had no interest. Sent him money offers. But in 2021, he had no interest. After the rumors had calmed down a little, they build back up. The rumors had calmed down a little. Signs. They build back up. He debuts on a Friday night. Signs. AEW Rampage. He debuts on a Friday night program. AEW Rampage in Chicago. His television program. Thunderous ovation. In Chicago. His thunderous pop. Thunderous ovation. Thunderous pop. Great promo. He returns. He's in the best shape. He returns. He's in the best shape. MMA training and dieting. Having gone through MMA training and dieting, and it was the biggest moment of that year, and possibly the biggest moment in AEW's history. The number 20 story. AAA, when Worlds Collide pay-per-view. AAA. This is 1994. When Worlds Collide pay-per-view. This was in Los Angeles, California. This was in LA Sports California. This is when AAA invaded the U.S. This is when AAA invaded the U.S. as the top star in Mexico. This is when you had Eddie Guerrero as the top star in Mexico. Eddie Guerrero, this was the show that Eddie Guerrero. This was the show that Eddie Guerrero and Art Barr came back to America, and were the hottest heels arguably in wrestling around the world. The hottest heels arguably in wrestling around the world as a tag team. This is also a show that featured Mike Tenay. And Eric Bischoff was at this show, and this is the show where he got Eric Bischoff the idea at show, and this is the show where he got Mexican talent to bring into WCW. To look into more Mexican talent to bring into WCW. This was a monumental show. This is one of the greatest shows of all time. One of the greatest pay-per-views. This is one of the greatest shows of all time. One of the greatest pay-per-views of all time. AAA when Worlds Collide. This introduced the lucha style to America. A lot of promoters, a lot of people in American wrestling were unaware as far as really getting a good example of what it could be, and this introduced that to them. Number 21, January 4th, 1999, an infamous day, infamous night. Now, on this night, this is the heat of the Monday Night Wars. You could say the turning point. WCW is running Nitro in the Georgia Dome. They had just done the Starrcade 98 pay-per-view. Bill Goldberg loses the world title, very controversial to this day, to Kevin Nash. On this show, they booked Nash as a face, challenging Hogan, the first time this would have happened in WCW, or period. Two of the former WWF champions, two WCW champions would face. The two biggest leaders of the NWO would face. It turns into a swerve. Goldberg comes after a night of being in a storyline where he harassed Elizabeth. It's a swerve. They reform the NWO. This was seen with great disdain amongst the wrestling community to this day. And then on the other program, on the USA Network, the WWF is airing Raw is War. Now, this episode was taped, I believe, in December. I believe it was late December 98, maybe the 28th or so, 29th. And this aired on the 4th. And this show featured Mick Foley, Mankind, winning the world title in the WWF, former WCW wrestler. The infamous concept of Bischoff giving away results. Bischoff gave away that Mick Foley was going to win the world title. Tony Schiavone, infamous line, that'll put butts in the seats. Well, that put eyes on their TV because half the Nitro audience turned the channel to watch it. And pretty much, WCW was not the same. Now, to break a myth, the next Thunder was the highest rated WCW Thunder of all time. And for the next about 2 months, WCW did still have huge ratings with Nitro. It didn't just tank. The tank happened in the summer, the late spring and summer of 99. They still did strong ratings in the fours in January and February of 99. So that's a myth. Number 20, biggest story of all time. Vince McMahon retires 2022. Now, obviously, he's returned now, but there was always speculation for the last 10, 15 years. Will Vince McMahon die in that chair? Will he ever retire? He gets into a sexual payola scandal, pretty much, forcing a quote-unquote retirement. Now, if you believed he really was gone for good, that's up to you. But still, the news of him actually leaving, and he was legitimately so-called gone. They had people saying they hadn't seen him at the Titan Sports, or formerly Titan, the WWE offices. They hadn't seen him. But who knows? Behind the scenes, he was working on business dealings. But as far as being in the company creatively, he physically wasn't around, but who knows? But just the idea of him actually retiring, this was a huge story. It would be bigger if he stayed retired, obviously, but I think number 20 is okay. Number 19, ECW closes. Now this is 2001. ECW, the last, you can say, true territory that wasn't like a developmental. ECW, they had changed the landscape of wrestling. They had adult television, adult storylines. A lot of the talent that went on to change wrestling in the bigger companies, the seed was planted in ECW. Steve Austin, that character was birthed in ECW in a way. You know, mannerisms were copied, moves, angles, style, music. ECW had changed the landscape of wrestling, but they always struggled financially. ECW, ran by Paul Heyman, a genius creatively, a horrible businessman. Horrible, just god-awful. And the finances came to a point they had no choice but to close or be sold, and they were, in the spring of 2001, bought by Vince McMahon and Titan Sports. The number 18 story of all time, 1996, the NWO forms. Now, this was another moment that changed wrestling. Hulk Hogan, who had not been a heel since the early 1980s, the lead, iconic, babyface good guy of wrestling for the 80s, the 90s. In the early 90s, he's a part of a steroid scandal, infamously lies on the Arsenio Hall show about his use of steroids. Around 1994, 1995, early 96, he's in WCW. He's getting the most mixed reaction he's ever had. At the same time, 94, 95, Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, Kevin Nash, Diesel, they're building their name in the WWF, the place of Hogan's former residence. Their contract expires. They come over to World Championship Wrestling. They invade. Hulk Hogan joins. It's built as a WWF invasion. This is the greatest, biggest heel turn of all time. This boosted WCW. Eventually, merchandise goes up, ratings go up. They were destroying the WWF in ratings. They had the market share of wrestling now. House shows, they were dominating. This changed wrestling forever. Now, whether or not it had a negative impact, well, that's another video. Number 17. Ted Turner buys WCW, 1988. Turner Broadcasting, CNN. Ted Turner, a mogul, a businessman, a visionary. The man Vince McMahon always wanted to be. That's another video. But he gets into wrestling. He boosted financially. WCW, NWA had been on the Superstation, 605 Wrestling. Eventually, he starts to battle Vince McMahon. He wins in the beginning. Ted Turner, he boosted the revenue of wrestling, the visibility of it. 1988. Number 16, the NWA is formed, 1948. This is the foundation of having a territory system that had rules, laws, consequences, an exchange of talent, a pipeline throughout the United States and internationally on foreign soil. The WWF, AWA, Memphis, Amarillo, the Bay Area territories, Seattle, Portland, rather. This controlled wrestling in the United States. This is what helped to form a balance between wrestlers, promoters, athletic commissions. This also helped to somewhat tame down the carny nature that had been in wrestling since its inception from the carnivals. Number 15, the Austin vs. Tyson storyline, 1998. The WWF had been getting destroyed by WCW across the board, and their counter to this was to bring in Mike Tyson. Rumored to be paid around $3 million, they bring in Mike Tyson, who at this time was suspended by the World Boxing Council for his actions in the ring against Evander Holyfield, the biting of the ear. Mike Tyson, he's brought into the WWF. They bring him in to help promote WrestleMania 14. They put him in there with Austin, Shawn Michaels, DX. They have an infamous, legendary segment, Austin and Tyson shoving match. McMahon gets involved. Security's everywhere. Now, Austin wins the world title. Tyson turns on Shawn Michaels, raises Austin's hand, the cosign, the rub. A note that many people did not know is Vince McMahon actually wanted to manage Mike Tyson's career. Not manage in wrestling, but manage his actual career. That did not happen. That would have been a disaster. But this helped to boost the WWF. It helped to boost Steve Austin as a major star in pop culture. Number 14, the Von Erich family deaths. Now, this was over decades. The last surviving member, Kevin Von Erich, but Carrie, Fritz, even the father. I mean, just electrocution, suicide, just a tragedy. This ultimately destroyed WCCW. This is a cautionary tale to anyone in wrestling. The Von Erich family deaths. There's been documentaries about it. I don't know how you watch them without shedding a tear or breaking down. They were major stars in the 80s, the 70s, the 80s, early 90s. But something about that, the spirit of death, it just was in that family for one reason or another. 13, the death of the territories, the 80s and early 90s. Now, the death of the territories was two main factors. Vince McMahon's national expansion, buying out television time in markets, taking talent, but also a lot of territories, the bookers, the promoters were not good businessmen. They also did not advance with the times. They could not see things shifting in culture and society. So that was the downfall. This led to the ultimate monopoly of wrestling being Vince McMahon, owning everything on a major level. This destroyed jobs, finances. It made it so you have an unstoppable beast in Vince McMahon, and everything is his vision, his influence. Number 12, WrestleMania 3, 1987. Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, the biggest wrestling match of all time. Hogan slams Andre, drops the leg, 1, 2, 3. In the Silver Dome, they have the fallacy of 93,000. It was about 77,000. But the event, the build-up was iconic. You know, Piper's Pit. Andre's a heel with Bobby Heenan, the biggest heel in wrestling, Bobby Heenan. Andre turns heel. Andre challenges Hogan. Hogan and Andre were built up as being friends for years. Andre rips the shirt rather, cuts him. What a great angle. Piper is in shock and awe. The build up, the match, technically the match was not a great technical match, but it's an iconic match for the entrance, the slam, the leg, the atmosphere, the ambiance. This skyrocketed wrestling into the mainstream even more than it already was. This was Andre the Giant's last giant moment. His last real hurrah. He was breaking down physically. This is the definition of monumental and iconic. Number 11, 1988. The death of Bruiser Brody. Bayamon, Puerto Rico. Bruiser Brody, Frank Goodish, legendary wrestler, a real outlaw. He moved from territory to territory. He was in Japan, Puerto Rico, everywhere. He was a world traveler, former NFL player. He played on the Washington Redskins. He was a wrestler. He did production. He was a booker. He's a definition of iconic, unique, legend. He was a frightening human being. He could really beat you to death. He's in Puerto Rico. He gets into a confrontation of sorts in a shower. He's stabbed to death. He's laid there and left there to bleed out. Very controversial. You'd never really heard or seen anything like this, even to this day, of this proportion. The death of Bruiser Brody. Number 10, 1983. Hulk Hogan wins the WWF title. Hulk Hogan, who had been in the WWF, in and out. He'd been in Japan. He'd been in AWA. He's in the WWF. Iron Sheik, who was a top heel in wrestling, had beat Bob Backlund for the world title. In Madison Square Garden, Hulk Hogan beats the Iron Sheik. That births Hulkamania. That explodes the WWF. Number 9, WrestleMania 1. Now, this is the show that Vince McMahon and Linda McMahon have always stated this was the make or break show. They put all their resources in it. This show helped wrestling become more mainstream than ever. Cyndi Lauper, Mr. T, The Garden, Hogan, Piper, Jimmy Snuka, Billy Martin, Liberace, Ali. I mean, my God. This is one of the greatest shows of all time. From the sense of the magnitude of it, the build-up, what it meant. The foundation it put in history for WrestleMania, for big events, for wrestling, for entertainment. Number 8, September 4th, 1995. WCW Nitro debuts up against WWF Raw. The Monday Night Wars begins. Now, this is when a young man named Eric Bischoff, who had auditioned to work for the WWF in prior years, gets to WCW. He reshapes the company. Ted Turner, who had bought the company, now finds someone to lead the company. You know, WCW went through so many bookers, Kip Fry, Bill Watts. They had so many people on creative, Ric Flair, Cornette, so many different people, Jim Herd. But he finally found Eric Bischoff in one way or another. Ted Turner gives him 2 hours every Monday night, changes wrestling forever. This is the first time someone really beat down and defeated Vince McMahon. This led to the greatest television in wrestling history from 1995 to about 2001 to the end. The Monday Night Wars begins. Number 7, biggest wrestling story of all time. The Montreal Screwjob. Bret Hart, from the famed Hart family, Stu Hart, Helen, Owen, there's a million of them. He grew up in and around wrestling. He knew the tradition of it. He gets to the WWF. He's a tag team wrestler. Eventually becomes a singles wrestler. Eventually gets pushed to the main event. He begins to develop a disdain with Shawn Michaels. Very real. They had fights backstage, confrontations. Bret Hart signs a long-term deal with the WWF in 1996. But when you get to the fall of 1997, Vince McMahon informs Bret Hart he can't afford to keep paying him the new contract that he's 1 year into. Vince McMahon gives Bret Hart the permission to go look at WCW. Bret gets his deal. While he's getting his deal, he's the WWF champion. Now, to leave any promotion, you have to drop the belt. Bret Hart, who grew up in wrestling, who is a traditionalist, should have understood this. But he wanted to do it on his own terms because the person they wanted him to lose to was Shawn Michaels, his arch enemy. And he wasn't going to do that because Bret Hart's a Canadian hero, so he wouldn't dare lose in Canada or anywhere else pretty damn much. So Vince McMahon double-crosses him. An age-old tactic by promoters in wrestling. It's the carny nature. The referee counts out Bret Hart. They give the belt to Shawn Michaels. Bret goes crazy. He goes to WCW, and his career is down the tubes. He's a mid-carder. He has a severe injury in Starrcade 99, kicked in the head by Bill Goldberg. And the Montreal Screwjob led to Vince McMahon being the biggest heel in wrestling history. And that was used to catapult the WWF to surpass WCW. It gave way to the rise of Steve Austin, DX, The Rock. And it changed wrestling, much like the NWO forming. This shifted wrestling. It's still an infamous night, a legendary story to this day. Bret Hart was bitter for years. He still is. To this day, Bret Hart is doing interviews still crying about this. But is he right? Or is he just stuck in the past? You decide. Number 6. The Austin vs. McMahon storyline. Playing off the Montreal Screwjob. 1998, Vince McMahon becomes an on-screen character permanently, leaves commentary, which he had been on since the late 70s. Steve Austin becomes the biggest fan favorite, biggest merchandise seller, biggest pay-per-view draw in wrestling history. His arch enemy, Vince McMahon, they battled from 97 to 2001 till they joined forces. Heel turns, face turns, obstacles. This, once again, changed wrestling. It made them two iconic figures in television, in media, in pop culture, in wrestling. Made Steve Austin the biggest star, McMahon the biggest villain. Number 5. Vince McMahon Jr. buys the WWF from his father. 1982. 80, 81, 82. These are the years where Vince McMahon is developing more of a business sense. He had been promoting skating rinks. He had promoted the Evel Knievel jump, things that failed. He wanted to get into wrestling promoting. His father is sick. He buys a company from his father. Vince McMahon changes wrestling into more entertainment, more showmanship, a bigger, grander spectacle. WrestleMania. You have outlandish characters, Ultimate Warrior, The Undertaker, Steve Austin, so on and so forth. His vision still seen today in good and bad ways. Number 4, The 1920s, the Gold Dust Trio sets the foundation of wrestling. The Gold Dust Trio set a business foundation for wrestling. You had Toots Mott, Strangler Lewis, Billy Sandow. At this time in the 20s, it was always, even before this, it was always debated by sports writers, was wrestling real, was it not? And these three got together and they basically created the direction of making it a more theatric work, what it ended up becoming known as, more of a sports entertainment. Not to the level it became with McMahon, but it was a modern promotion that they made of wrestling. And they are the ones who kind of had the first tactics of, let's sign wrestlers to contracts, let's go from other bookers, let's go to them and kind of take from their talent, which is something that, Vince McMahon did, Bischoff did, every promoter does, and they fight about and all these things. But they really set a foundation of wrestling booking, promotion, and the battle from territories when it came to talent, positioning, all these type of things. Also, they kind of perfected the idea of, working matches, who goes over, and how to still try and present it as being real, because that was always something they had to deal with is, wrestling in those times was covered by newspapers, but newspapers were kind of like jokingly look down on wrestling, and it was really a hot button thing of, is this real or not? And they just changed everything that wrestling was seen as and known as, and without them, wrestling might not exist, period, the way it is and the way it became. Number 3, biggest wrestling story of all time. The death of Owen Hart. Owen Hart, Canadian wrestler, came up once again from the dungeon. His father, Stu Hart. He gets to the WWF. He works his way up the card. He has his ups and downs. He's there for Montreal. He's there for Austin. He's there for the Hogan era, everything. In 1999, he's doing a comedic gimmick. At this time, he did plan to phase out his wrestling career. He was, he wanted to move to being more of a family man, fireman. He just built a home. On a pay-per-view called Over the Edge, they do a stunt where he's going to make his entrance from the ceiling of the arena. The stunt goes wrong. He ends up falling to his death. This changed the way that stunts were handled in wrestling. Around the same time in WCW, Sting, he was known for his entrance being he comes from the ceiling, and WCW did do that entrance a couple more times, but eventually they got rid of it. This changed the precautions taken with certain stunts in wrestling. This also led to a feud that pretty much is still going between Owen Hart's widow and the company. WWF actually sued her. The fall and the passing of Owen Hart. Number 2, the second biggest story in wrestling history. The Chris Benoit murders. Chris Benoit, another Canadian, influenced by Owen Hart, Bret Hart, so on, Dynamite Kid. In the 1990s, he gets to the promotion ECW. When he's in ECW, they have a female valet named Woman, Nancy Sullivan. At some point, Chris Benoit goes to WCW. Nancy Sullivan, is there. They begin to date. They eventually have a child in 1999. They get married. Chris Benoit in 2007. At this point, you did not know, but looking back, he was suffering mentally, physically, spiritually. His close friend Eddie Guerrero had passed. And really, I'm going to tie in Benoit's murder with Eddie Guerrero's death as both being at number 2 in this, because they tie in so well. Eddie Guerrero had passed. They had similar paths. Japan, Mexico, everywhere around the world, ECW, WCW. Eddie Guerrero, who had struggled to get to the main event, he finally gets there in 2004. But physically, his body is breaking down. He's heavily on steroids. They both are. Eddie Guerrero has a heart attack in November of 2005. Close friend of Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit. Chris Benoit begins writing in a diary as if he's writing to Eddie Guerrero. These are all mental health issues. This scarred Chris Benoit. So did the passing of a lot of wrestlers at this time. The Big Boss Man, Ray Traylor, Mr. Perfect, Owen Hart. Many wrestlers that Chris Benoit knew and was friends with were passing. So this is all weighing on him. And then in the summer of 2007, he takes the life of his son, Daniel, his wife, and then himself. This changed wrestling. The Benoit murder, Eddie Guerrero's death, it changed wrestling. When Eddie Guerrero passed, WWE brought in a slight drug program. But when Benoit did what he did, it was severely brought in. The government was getting involved damn near. Gonna sanction this, but that didn't happen. This changed the drug use in wrestling, the drug testing in wrestling. It changed chair shots to the head shots in general. It changed blood use. This frightened the McMahons. This is what led to them ultimately going from TV-14 to PG. This is what did it. Not sponsors, not money, Benoit. Because they wanted to change their image completely. And the number one story in the history of wrestling, the WWF buys WCW / WCW closes. Now this is the biggest story of all time because this led to the ultimate one company, one man runs everything. WCW, who had the history of the NWA, which is another reason why this is number one. It wasn't just WCW. WCW was the history of the NWA, dating back to the 40s, dating back to Dusty, Flair, Luthez, Harley Race, so on and so forth. All the way to Hogan, Goldberg, Sting, NWO, what have you. It was the end of a gigantic era for wrestling to never be the same again. Never to be duplicated. This destroyed jobs. It made wrestling change. The interest was killed in wrestling. The money was gone. You had one company doing everything. The fan base shrunk. When WCW closed, their audience did not come and watch WWF. Those people left and have never returned. This made it so now more jobs are scarce. More politics are going to happen to keep those jobs. More independent promotions popped up, but they could never sustain anything. This changed wrestling for the worse, and you're still seeing the impact today. It's never recovered. Vince McMahon has tried to do a brand extension, never worked. He's tried to do this, that, it's never worked. You have other companies, TNA, AEW, they will never duplicate WCW in any form or any fashion. They never have and they never will. This ruined wrestling forever. Now that's my 25 stories. Tell me what you think. Is this order accurate? Is it correct? Did I miss something? Am I wrong? Am I right? Like, share, comment, subscribe. Until the next time, that is it.